recording. All right, so last week I asked you to give me a tile, a background tile. So I have one there. That's a big background tile. And I asked you to give me like one little platform. Okay, so I have mine here, and it's just like a little square platform. You can see they're both color matched, and it is going to be a large background with little platform tiles used. The reason we use tiles is because they're unit based, so one unit size, and especially when you're starting design, a lot of the time when you're creating a level, you use unit sizes. Even huge AAA companies will do that. They're just much better at hiding that they're using unit sizes. They'll have tile grids even for 3D or both for 3D and 2D games, and then they'll like merge it and hide kind of like the edges. And I'll show you some of that today, a little bit of that. Today we'll get a little bit technical. We're going to go into Unity. I hope people remember their laptops and install Unity if you have it. If not, some of the machines do have Unity. When we go to groups, please, people with laptops, prioritize allowing people who don't have laptops to use the machines with Unity. If that makes sense. All right, so this will get a little bit technical. I don't expect you to remember everything off the bat, but it is all recorded, and I will be uploading it as soon as I can after this class. So you should be have access to it while you're trying to do the work as well. Okay, so we're going to do Unity. Again, this is a PNG. This one is, I think, 1024 by 1024. Properties. Details. Yeah, 1024 by 1024. That's my background. And then I have this. This is my tile. And this, I personally went 256 by 256. Again, it doesn't quite matter. It just means that I get a higher resolution tile. You can have a lower resolution tile. You can go 128 by 128. It's just the number that I've chosen. And I am going to go to Unity. And this is the first time we're using this. I'm going to create a new project just so you see what the kind of process is like. When you create a new project, there's a bunch of options that you can have. These are all like crazy extra stuff. Don't need to worry about them. Generally, we worry about these two, 2D and 3D. This thing, URP, that is a universal render pipeline. If HDRP is a high definition render pipeline. The differences between those, URP is it's for, essentially you can use it both for mobile and for PC. It's universal. That's why it's called universal. If you deploy in a console, it should work in console as well. It is still, it's released technically. It's not in beta anymore, but it's not as fully supported as default 2D. But we're going to use URP because it is what they're building towards. In the future, it will just be URP and URP and HDRP. Okay, so universal and high definition. If I get too technical, let me know. So I'm going to go for 2D. Unity is a 3D engine by default in the past, but they have a very robust set of 2D tools now. So we're going to be working in layers essentially. So like if I have a 2D thing, we use Photoshop, you know, with their layers. The same thing applies in Unity. There's going to be layers, stuff in front shows in front, stuff behind is pushed behind. That makes sense? Okay. Yeah. Oh yes, sauce. All right, cool. So we're gonna do 2D URP, Universal Render Pipeline. This will take a little while. This is where what I'm gonna call it. I'm gonna call this 2022, 23 design practice, and I'm gonna do all that stuff in there. Location, wherever you want to save it, and I'm saving that. And this might take a little while because it needs to create a template. Oh, sorry, create a project. It shouldn't be too long. Fingers crossed. Meanwhile, I also will show you this other thing. So you can kind of see that this is a tileable platform, right? It's like one piece that can keep going. You might notice I have a bunch of other stuff in there, and that's because I've also done something called a 9 slice. This is a 9 slice. A 9 slice is, you can't tell, but oh, it's so bad, I'm so sorry. But the middle piece is here, and then you have an upper piece, a lower piece, side pieces, and corner pieces. Does that make sense? And what that allows me is if I create a long stretch top, it won't just be a hard cut. I can use top pieces to make it irregular, to make it look more organic. I'll show you what that looks like in Photoshop. So, there's a 9 slice there. And you can kind of see what I mean. This is the middle tile. This is the side tile, side, top, bottom, and the corners. And the way that I built this was essentially I imported in. Let me turn that off. I basically just imported in that mid tile, which is the original tile that I had. Enter, and all I need to do then is I can copy. Oops, sorry. Copy paste this into all the edges around. And the quick and easy way is essentially I would just like erase them off using some sort of eraser. Yes, good question. So just give me 1 second. Let me just do that. So essentially, I'll be doing this and erasing off the sides and the edges. And I can add little things as well. I can add like maybe corners will have a little flower on them. Maybe side edges will have like vines hanging off them. I can add things as well because they'll only show on the sides. The only thing I do need to make sure is I need to make sure like this side piece, for example, that needs to be able to tile vertically as well. They need to match together. So I'll need to bring them to a separate pattern preview to check. How did I get the grid? So it is control and like the at button or command and the at button. The other option is view, show, grid. Just here, there's a shortcut for it. So view, show, grid. And if the grid is not exactly what you want, in my case, because remember one of my units was 256 by 256, so I set the grid, edit, preferences, guides, grids, and slices. I know it's a bit ridiculous that you have to go there to change it. And I did it grid line every 256 because that's the size and width of my unit, if that makes sense. Again, if I had a 128 by 128 tile, I'd be typing 128 by 128. Does that make sense? You sure? You're all good? Okay. Yeah. So there's two options. You can either export, and there is in Unity a 9 slice thing. You can do like a full 9 slice. I don't really want to show that because it is a bit more advanced. Not really, but it's a bit. What you can also do really easily, because we have the grid set up, if you use the crop tool, that's C, crop tool, you see I have these handles around, and they will snap to like the grid. So I can just go enter, I'll save that out, save that as the, what is that, bottom right, which I already have here, so I'd save that there, and then Control Z to go back, and then just do individually each piece. That's the manual way. There is a way in Unity, but I just want to show you that way just to make it clear. That make sense? Yeah? Okay, so that was, you don't have to do this. I'm just saying this is an option if you want to go a bit fancier. This thing is called 9 slice, because otherwise what we end up with is a very, very square like platform, and it's just like a perfect square. So it's not like when we tile it, it will tile, but it looks very inorganic. And again, some games, that's what you want. That's fine. All right, so this is Unity. Is it how many people's first time seeing Unity? Okay. Okay. All right, so I need to do a little bit of explanation. The way Unity works is zoom in and out, middle mouse button, click a middle mouse button to pan, and you can select stuff either by clicking on it in the scene view here, or selecting it here in the hierarchy. Okay, these are all things that go into the scene. So a scene is like almost like a level if you think about it. Everything I dump into that scene is into that one scene, that one level, and it'll all be shown in the hierarchy here. So I should be able to see them. I can also create stuff in here. So for example, in the hierarchy, jeez. Right click, 2D object, I can create a, let me do a circle, because why not? And you see I have a little circle here. And you can create stuff. There are shortcuts that I would suggest you remember. W, E, and R. These are the most basic shortcuts. W for moving. E for rotation. Well, you can't, it's circle, so you can't see it. And then scale for scaling. And you can either scale along one axis, or if you click in the middle, it'll scale on both axes. Is that okay? All good so far? Yeah. W, E, and R. R. Whiskey, Echo, Romeo. All right, so you can see I created a circle. It's there. I can rename it either like by typing in here, and this is where we have the inspector. So I've just renamed that to whatever, and you can see that the hierarchy is called that. When I select that, it gives me the inspector for that thing. For any of these things, whenever I select them, the inspector will change depending on what it is. The inspector allows me to edit stuff related to that game object. So that thing that I have is called a game object. Everything that I add into the scene is a game object. And the inspector allows me to control stuff related to it. And it is going to be context dependent depending on what I'm selecting. So I'm selecting a sprite, so it shows me the sprite renderer. I can change like color of it, the tint of it. I can change whether it's flipped. Again, you can't see it's flipped. If I flip it, it's a circle flip, so you can't tell. And anything to do with sprite renderer. When I move it, you see the transform. Every game object has a transform, and a transform is basically just a position. And the scale and the rotation. So if I rotate it, if I scale it, you can see it being scaled. So I scaled it 2.4 in the y-axis. Okay? I know that's a lot. Is that okay, more or less? Yes? All right. So the stuff we have here by default, every 2D scene, this is the 2D project, comes with a camera, it comes with a global light. 2D global light just means everything's illuminated. If I turn that off, I think everything goes black. But the main camera is what I want to focus on. Here you can see a scene view and a game view. The game view shows me what that camera is looking at. We're not going to worry about moving cameras. We're not going to worry about players yet. We're not going to worry about anything like that. I just have a locked camera. It's looking at a place, and I just want to take whatever's inside it. Okay, I don't want to mess around with anything else. I would ideally like to put my game view like down here. I can just click and drag to like move it around. So I'm going to put it like here. People have different ways of doing it. I like doing it like this. And I can have my little game view down here. So I can see what the camera's looking at. You can kind of see it changing. Like if I resize this, what the camera's showing changes. If I created that, let's create again, 2D objects. Right. I'll do a capsule. You can kind of see that where I move it in relation to the camera, it's showing in the game view. So that's what the player will see. Okay? Make sense? All right. So basically, this is the behind the scenes look of the game. This is what the player sees. So you can have all sorts of crap hidden in here, which is very, very common, and the player doesn't see. So, for example, let's do the background. So I'll show you something that player usually doesn't see. So let's go to the background. This is just one tile. It should just tile, and I can just click and drag it in. Oh, where's Unity? There. Oh, I might have to open it like this and drag it in from the folder. You can either drag it in like that and let go. I'm going to show you the other way. The other way is you right click, import new asset, and then go look for it. So in this case, it is desktop, there, design practice, and there's the tile. Okay, so you can do either way. Drag it in from the folder or import new asset. When you import an asset, it goes into this folder, the last folder down the bottom. That is the assets folder. The project folder contains everything inside the game, like everything in the project. So that's all, like if I have special packages, if I imported special stuff, if I created scripts, if I did any programming, and it also creates my assets. Sorry, contains my assets. And my assets are all like my sprites, my characters, my animations, whatever. They're all in there. And I have different folders in here. I can create a folder, so I can create a folder, and I'll call this folder background. No, call it sprites. And I can, that was right click and create folder here, and I can just drag that tile into there, and that is my background tile. All right, all good so far? Okay, I'm gonna do also put in my platform tile, and I'm only gonna worry about the middle one for now. I'm not gonna stress you with doing the tops and sides, just the middle one for now. So they both come in as something called a sprite. A sprite is a 2D image that is a little bit different than a 3D texture. When we go further on, we'll look at textures as well. But sprite is specifically a 2D image. It doesn't need lighting to show itself. So if I drag it in here and I turn off the light, it should still show. I don't need the light for it to be visible to me. If it's a 3D object, it needs light. Otherwise, it's completely black. That makes sense? So I want to get rid of that. So the thing that it doesn't know is what 1 unit is. So it knows this is a 256 by 256 sprite. It doesn't know how many units I want that sprite to be. So I'm going to say every unit is 256 because it's 256 by 256. And I can just hit apply. And now when I drag it in, you see it's much smaller because it now fits to 1 unit space. And the unit space in Unity is always like 1 meter by 1 meter in Unity. So that's 1 meter. That this grid is 1 meter. So there's multiple ways of creating a level. I can manually put this in and like Control D will duplicate. I can move that and I can hold V. V allows me to snap them, so I can snap them. And you can make a level like this. It's just a pain. In the old days, that's what you would have to do in the old days. Before the 2D tile set stuff, you would have to make it like this. Some people will still make a level like this if I have an irregular shape. So if I made like a rock shape that wasn't squares and it couldn't tile, and it was just one rock piece, you would manually go and place it there. And that's fine. For us though, we're not going to do that. We're going to be a bit smarter. And we're going to use something called a tile map. A tile map, in my hierarchy, right click, 2D object, tile map, and I want a rectangular one. There's multiple different types. There's hexagonal ones, so if your game is like made of little hexagons, or if it's isometric, it'll be like 45 degrees, kind of a diamond shape. But I want a rectangular one. Click rectangular, and I have a tile map. This is going to be my platforms. Okay. So that is my platforms, and that's where my tile map's going to be. All right. By default, the grid size is 1 to 1 unit. So one of this should fit in one of these tiles. Now what can I do with this? So if I open Window, 2D, Tile Palette, I can use my tile palette to kind of like paint on my tile map. All right, so let me create a new palette. I'll just call this platform palette. Just create that. Just save it in the same folder, that's fine. And then it says drag tile, sprite, or sprite texture assets here. Cool. So all I need is to drag that tile in there. It will convert it from a sprite into a tile asset, okay? So that's all this is doing. It's saying, you have a sprite, I'm going to convert it into a tile asset for you. Cool. Once I have this, you can kind of see like, I'm not clicking, I'm just hovering, and it allows me to like paint. So I can paint like platforms, for example. And that's what a tile map allows me to do. I have a painting tool, I have a fill box, which I can drag to fill. And then I have like a complete fill, which will fill everything. And I can also erase. All right, so this allows me to really quickly generate platforms, level geometry very, very quickly, without having to worry about like manually doing what you saw me doing before, which was place them one by one and then drawing a collider around them and making them have physics. Yeah. Yeah. So let's try another one. Let's say I really wanted the top for some reason. So I've imported that. That is a asset. I'm going to make a mistake here on purpose and see if you can figure out what I'm doing. I've just dragged it in. Cool. What's the problem? Why is it doing that? Huh? The size is wrong. The pixels per unit. It thinks it's 100 pixels, but I need to tell it it's 256. In this case, because I have a 256 by 256, and that fixes itself. Great. So I dragged in the other one, so that's the top, and I just do the top. And basically, if I had all the 9 pieces, I could have the top, the sides, corners, all the bottoms, and everything. That makes sense? Yeah? Okay. Let me just do the top and the bottom for now, just to show you. And I'm going to make just a really basic kind of platformy thing. And just that's it. Oh, no. Oh my gosh. I kind of messed up here. Ooh. And again, the thing that I was saying, we're hiding stuff in the player. The player sees this. As far as they know, it's a full level. I have like messy stuff sticking out the sides. They don't know. The camera doesn't see it, so it's fine. Let's do bottom, a little bit of cover. It's like a little impassable area they can't go through. Okay. So I can keep adding stuff to my tile palette as much as I want. I can have different colors of tiles, different types of tiles, whatever. I just need to drag them in here and continue adding to my tile palette. You have to be careful here. The active tile map is platforms, which is this one. It means I'm working on that tile map because I can add more tile maps. So for example, I can add like 2D tile map, another one, and this will be like platforms 2. Let me really quickly make an example that will be obvious. I know it's terrible, but it's fine. We just wanted to let's put that in here. Make sure that is 256 pixels per unit because I have 256. And let's put that in here. And I can use the same palette, but I might not want to work on platforms. I might want to work on platforms 2. So I need to change it here to platforms 2. And then this, you see the way it's not like overriding the stuff that I have there because it's a different tile map. And this one, in this case, it's behind. I can make it go in front by changing the sorting layer, which is here, the sorting layer. So order and layer, they're both, I believe, on 0. But if I want this platforms to, everything in platforms 2 to show in front, I'll just change this to 1, and that will be in front. All right, so the higher number it is, the more in front it is. That makes sense? All right, so let's do -1. So that's like, for example, what I could do is I could have like a little sprite of decorations or like some like extra background like assets and platforms that wouldn't be actually interactable to the player, but I can have them in the background. Maybe I'll make like a column here. Was that thunder? Wow. GG. All right. Huh? Possibly. We're supposed to be grounded, but you know. All right, so that's correct. Platforms 2 is -1, so it's behind. Platforms 1 is in front, and you can kind of see the game level. You see what's happening. So hopefully, as a player, you learn that the green ones you can ignore because you don't walk on them, and the blue ones are the ones you walk on. Does that make sense so far? Yeah. All right. Slightly more complicated. Let's go. I am going to add a little. I don't remember why I made this. Peaches is peaches, and this was like a little like decoration thing. And let's also make this 256 for 1 unit. Apply. And this is just a sprite, so I'm just going to drag it in. If it's a sprite and you don't need it to like do a platform, you can just drag it in. You see the way Peaches is disappearing? That's because Peaches sorting layer, the ordering layer, is still set to 0. When two things are on 0, sometimes they kind of like interact. So I'm going to set Peaches to 2. And that should put, yeah, Peaches in front of everything now. Cool. All right, so I'm going to give Peaches physics. So I'm going to add, there's a couple things I need to add. I need to add a rigid body, 2D, because every time we see a component that is in, there's possible to have like a name or a 2D version. We're working in 2D, so I need to add a 2D. A rigid body 2D, that's under add component, and then add, like I just searched for it. Rigid. 2D component allows it to essentially be affected by physics, so it can fall. Like if I press play, Peaches should fall. Yay. Now Peaches doesn't interact with anything because it has a rigid body which allows it to be affected by gravity, but it's got no colliders. As game players, hopefully you all are familiar with it, like the term colliders. If you're not, it is something separate to the visuals. I can have a collider that doesn't fit with the visuals, and you see this often in games where, I don't know if you've noticed, like you might walk to a chair, but it stops like here, and you can't actually get to it because the collider is maybe a box around the chair, and it's different to the actual visuals. Sometimes it's mapped exactly pixel perfect and it's exactly the shape of the chair, but a lot of the time for optimization, they'll use a different collider shape. That okay so far? All right. So I just realized I just showed you adding components, but for every game object you can add components. So let me remove this one. By default, when I drag Peaches in, all it was is a sprite. It only has a sprite renderer, so it shows the sprite, and then it's got a transform, which shows its position, rotation, and scale. I can add a component, and that is giving it extra functionality, and I'm adding a rigid body 2D. Cool. All right, so that could fall, but I also need a collider. I'm going to add a collider. Collider. And again, I can do a box collider. So that means Peaches is gone. That's going to be the collision box for Peaches. If I try to go up to it, it will hit it like a box. I can do a circle collider. There's a capsule. But I want to do this thing called a polygon collider. And by default, it will take the shape of the sprite so that Peaches will now be able to like twirl around like a starfish. If it gets hit on one of the legs, it'll physically simulate that correctly. This is more expensive. So if I have loads of this in my game and I'm running on mobile, it's probably going to lag. Yes?
Do you have to add or
Let's see whether it's built in, okay? So if I do this now, will it work? If I drop it, will Peaches hit a platform? Why not? You are honestly, that's some people don't get this, and that's really good because the platforms don't have colliders. I need a collider in order to interact with another collider. Otherwise, I just pass through. If I don't have a collider, it's as if I can show myself. It's as if I'm a hologram. I don't have any substance. So on platforms, and this is slightly different. Remember, I'm not platforms 2. I want to be platforms. I'm going to add a Tilemap collider, 2D. Ooh. And what that does is it gives me a collider for each single tilemap. This will work, so let's try that. And you'll see, hopefully, you'll see that Peach. You see the way like it does connect and it spins correctly. Did you see that? Or no? Let me do it again. So Peaches should hit the edge and bounce off sideways, and that's what it's meant to do. I can also optimize this because this is giving it like a single collider for each box, which is fine, but sometimes you have issues with that. So again, you don't have to do this, but if you want to, I can add something called a composite collider. And I need to tell the tilemap that it's used by a composite, and that will convert them all. You see now the green collider is now one piece, and it just makes it neater. Again, it's fine. They both will work. It's just for you to know for optimization purposes. All right, any questions so far? The other thing that's cool about the composite collider is, I believe, window, 2D, tile palette. I believe I've erased these. It will update. Nope. Oh no, I'm on platforms too. Platforms. Yeah, it does. So the composite collider will update. The tilemap collider you need to like regen. All right. So again, if you're going crazy, if you think about games where you can like destroy the environments, that would be kind of how it would work. You would destroy those tiles, and then the collider would like reform to fit them. All right. All good so far, or do we need a little break? I only have like 2 more things. All good? You sure? Okay. Now to me, even more complex. So far I've been working in 2D, right? But you've realized I don't have a background. This blue, you're gonna hate this blue. This is Unity default blue. It means there's nothing there in the background. There's 2 colors in Unity. Blue means there's no background. Pink means it's like an asset that hasn't got a texture or a material. All right, so blue and pink, you know something's wrong. When you see that in a game, you laugh at it. So we have a background, and we want to fill it. I can use a tilemap, but in this case, I don't want to. I want my background to not be affected by 2D lights. Okay, and if it is a tilemap, it will be affected by 2D lights. Let me show you. I'm going to create a light, 2D object. Light, and let me do a spotlight 2D. Here's my little spotlight. Keep renaming it instead of spotlight 2D. And let me move that. Can you see it affect? I'll make it bigger. So the intensity of the outer, I'll make the intensity higher. Can you see it affecting the? All right. So it is affecting the platforms. I can make like different like layers and tell it to ignore other layers and stuff like that. You can do that as well. But I want to do something slightly different, and in the future I'll explain why. So let's see. So I have this 2D light. I have a radius, that's how big it goes. The intensity is how intense it is. And you have like an inner radius as well. So if you want like it to be a really hot spot in the middle and then fall off. So for example, if I'm creating a torch light, I might want it to have a really hot spot in the middle and then have a big fall off. So I could do that. The color is here. I can change the color. And in the future, when we go to animate, I'll show you how to animate so you can do stuff like this where it flickers. Like I'm doing this manually now by just moving my mouse, but we can do it in code or we can do it through animation. Okay, yeah. What do you mean by reflections? Do you mean like... It is built in. There are these things called packages I don't want to deal with yet, but I'll talk to you about them in the future. Basically, there's like these extra functionality that you can download and bring in. And some of them are built by Unity, some of them are built by different people. One of the Unity ones is reflections. For 2D, I'm not sure if there's 2D reflective water, but yeah. Yeah. Our asset store. I don't know for 2D. For 3D, there is a default one for water. For 2D, I'm not sure. I saw one like in a tech demo, but I don't know if that's released. I'll have to check back on that for you. But yeah, you can kind of see, so the light's there, and you can kind of see it affecting. It's really nice. It works. It didn't used to work, by the way, so this is nice that we have 2D lights. So I'm going to not use a Tilemap for my background for two reasons. One is I don't want it to be affected by lighting. I can put it on a different layer and tell it not to affect, and that's fine. Because if I go to the light, you can see my target layer. It's affecting all. So I can make a new layer and put the background layer on it and tell the lights not to affect it. I can do that, but it just is easier if I by default it doesn't. And the second reason is I want my background to be able to scroll, to be able to tile. So have you ever seen a game when you're walking, the background like moves as well, and like sometimes things in the background move at different rates? That's called parallax scrolling. We won't stress on that today, but I just want to show you how to set it up so I can do that. So what I need then from the background is, instead of a, wait, this is 1, 2, 4. Instead of a sprite, I want this to be a default. That is a 3D texture. Okay, as in it's available, sorry, to be used by 3D objects. And now I can't drag it in. See, if I drag it in, it's like, no, that's a 3D texture. You can't just drag it in. It's not a sprite. So what a 3D texture can go onto is 3D stuff. So I can create a 3D thing. So instead of going to 2D object, I'm creating a 3D object. I'm creating something called a quad. A quad is just like one 3D polygon. If you know what a polygon is, that's what 3D models are made of. They're made of little polygons. A quad is just one polygon. Let's scale that up. And you see it's in front of everything, but it has no sorting layers because it's not a sprite. So I can't tell it to go behind. I need to convert from 2D mode to 3D mode. This is what my level looks like in 3D, which is pretty cool. And I just need to move it, like manually move it behind. Wait, the other way maybe? My camera's here. Okay, I'm gonna manually move it there. Can I make it the sorting layer of this one? Go up to 0, and this one up to 1, and then teachers is on 2. That's fine. So my quad's in the background, like so. That's my level in 2D, and you can see like it's 2D because it has no depth. It only has like X and Y axis. And then if I click back the button, I'll go back to 2D. So there's my quad behind everything. Why am I using a quad? Well, if I add the tile to the quad, I can do a few things to it. So if I open this up here under the material, so you see the quad is different. It's got like quad, it's got a transform, but it's got a mesh filter and mesh render because it's a mesh, meaning it's a 3D object. I don't need a collider because I don't need to collide with anything. So I can just tick that off. And then it has this shader. and the shader controls how it looks. So I can go to tiling, and I can tile this. So I can tile more of it, if that makes sense. You see the way it's stretching? That's because it doesn't know that it's supposed to tile. I need to go back to the texture and tell it wrap mode instead of clamping to repeat, and this will work. I need to apply. You see the way it's repeating now. So I've tiled it. I know I've showed a lot of stuff. It is recorded. I'm not expecting you to do this today. So that tiling now allows me to like squeeze in more or less of it. And what I can do then in code or through animation, ideally through code, I can do this offset thing. So you kind of see the bottom. If I offset this, it offsets the tile. The texture. And that's how you kind of get that background like it scrolls. But actually, it's just one thing that sticks there. It's scrolling the texture on it. The thing doesn't actually move. We don't create like new textures going forwards. Like we're not generating new ones that keep moving forwards. We're actually just using the texture and just offsetting it. Because it's a lot cheaper, it's a lot faster, it's a lot easier, and it's less chance of something breaking. So I can, if I wanted to, generate a new quad every time, move it over there, snap it there in code, make them both move, generate another one, snap it over, move it back, delete the ones at the end, or I can just offset the texture. It's just much easier. Okay, so this is like one of the tricks that are used in game design. There's a lot of stuff that like, as long as the player doesn't know, and it's easier to do for you, just do it, as long as it doesn't break. Okay, any questions so far? I know we've covered a lot of stuff. Oh yeah, the last thing is you can see that the light doesn't affect the quad. It's affecting the 2D objects, but it doesn't affect the 3D object at all because it's a 3D object. 2D lights only affect 2D stuff. Yes. Yes. That quad with shader, there is a X and a Y tile. Okay. So again, sometimes you'll see games where like the visuals stop like at the top of the screen, and I don't know if you've ever seen like speedrunners or anything like where they break the level to get outside the level, and sometimes you see the hard cut off. That's because of this, because you're not supposed to be there. So sometimes you see the like behind the scenes jaggedy bits you're not supposed to see. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's make this both 1 and 1 to see. So by 1 and 1, it's like just the whole texture fills the whole quad. Okay? If I do 2 in the x-axis, that fits 2 of them in the x-axis, and then just keeps going. And then 2 in the y, for example. So now there's two sideways and 2 horizontal. Vertical. Any other questions so far? There's a bunch of extra stuff here. We're not going to touch that for now. We will see this towards the end of the semester, hopefully, where we get to 3D. But for now, I just want you to focus only on 2D because, as you can see, it's complicated enough. Yeah.
Back with the platforms, is there a way to make it that it automatically puts the top bit on top? You know what I mean?
Like the one that I wanted to be in front.
No, I mean when you had.
Oh, sorry. Like when I put it there and then like I had to manually place the top parts. Okay. Yes. Yes. There's a thing called rule tiles, and rule tiles are slightly more complicated. You need to set them up, but you can tell them to have rules. So like if I put that middle tile and there's nothing around it, it will automatically populate it with the top, bottom sides. You need to set it up though. It is a bit complex, but that will be later. But why rule tiles are cool is you can do them, again, if I was saying about exploding environments, you can do it so like the tiles will automatically change. So let's say if I blow up a hole and then water fills it, the tiles on the side of it can know, oh, the tile next to me needs water. I'll now change myself to be a tile that's like a little bit wet, for example. And it'll do that automatically. So, but it is a lot of setup to do. But yes, they do exist. Anything else? Any other questions? For now, just manually do it. It's so much easier than setting up a rule tile. I don't want to burden. We've done a lot today. Yeah.
So just as the topic set of rule tiles, say if you have several kind of tile textures,
Sure.
like a background, and you want to kind of randomize them. So
Yeah.
Like will that also go into rule
Yeah, they can go into rule tiles as well. Yeah. Yeah, I mean you can also build your own if you're pretty good at coding, but just use the roll tiles. They're pretty good. Yes, sorry. Yeah. No. So let me grab the camera, right? So imagine my camera is my player, and I'm moving right. No, doesn't. So what you'll often see, and this is a trick, they'll have the quad, and this is a good time to segue to parents and children. They'll have the background childed to the main camera. And childing means if I'm a child, I follow my parent. Anywhere my parent goes, my child goes. And I can have children of children. So, for example, I can put a, let's say, I'll make a 2D sprite square. Oh my god, it's so huge. And that is childed to the quad. So where the quad goes, it goes with. And where the camera goes, they both go with. But it itself is individual as well. So that's like the hierarchy of the children. That's why it's called a hierarchy. Now, your question. If I, let's say I'm the main camera and I'm moving along, my background now moves with me because it's childed. But I also need to move it and in code, which we haven't done yet, also make it like offset as well. So it only is that one quad moving, but the offset makes it look as if it's moving with me. Again, it's a trick. But it just means, again, I don't have to quad the entire level. I just do one. Right? There are exceptions. Some games, they will have a whole background texture. Especially if it's like high-res game. The entire background for the entire level is one texture. Other games will build it out of like tiles, and they will build the whole level with tiles. Other games like mine, if I know up and down it's the same texture, I'll do this. Because then I can just offset it based off where the camera is. Is there another camera? Oh, sorry, another question? Another camera. There was another question going up, but someone chickened out, or the question got answered. Okay, we will be looking at like all the offsets in code and stuff later. We'll be looking at next week. I want to introduce you to animated sprite sheets. So we will be looking at trying to get like decorations, for example. So let's say, I don't know if you've seen in a game like the mushrooms bouncing around, that kind of stuff, right? We'll be looking at making stuff like that. Yeah. There's a lot of ways. Do you have a player in there right now? Or okay. Again, that's advanced stuff, which we'll get to later. You can write your own camera controller. That's always an option. The cheapest and easiest way, which is terrible, is you child the camera to your player. Cheap and easy. It works. Terrible though, because it's like exactly perfect. And if you imagine, like if I am a game where I get knocked back or I fall down, the camera falls at exactly the same speed. It's kind of crap. We don't need to do that. So there's a thing called Cinemachine, which we'll look at later. It's inbuilt to Unity, and what Cinemachine, well, I have to download it, but a Cinemachine allows me to kind of have like cinematic controls. It was made for creating like movies or animations in Unity or cutscenes, but it works for 2D as well. So I can do a thing where there's like a follow camera. So like here's my player, here's my camera. If I just child it, they move exactly, which is kind of crap. With Cinemachine, I can do a follow and I can tell it to have a lag. So like, it won't move at all if I'm in this area, but if I move too far away, then it starts following, and it can like slowly start falling. If I fall, it'll slowly fall. So it kind of has a lag thing as well. We'll look at that later. It's exactly a dead zone. You can see there's like little dead zones you can set up as well. But again, that's advanced. I want you to work on this for now. Worry about a fixed camera. Worry about making things pretty now, and then we'll look at characters as well. We will. I'll give you code for it, and we'll look at Cinemachine. It'll get pretty complex later on. But don't be stressed. Everything will be recorded, and we'll take it at your pace. Any other questions before we break off? Okay. Last week, this group went first. Is that right? Yeah. So this group goes first. Yeah, I don't know if you're still sitting in your groups, but whoever was there on day one, you're going in first. And I will